Welcome to The Explainer. So, if you've been glancing at the headlines lately, you might just see a bunch of totally disconnected stories, right? A pipeline deal over here, a massive dinosaur auction over there. It's kind of like a giant puzzle. Well, today, our goal is to put all those pieces together and paint a cohesive, really fascinating picture of a world in transition. So, let's just dive right in.
Here is our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to start big with the economy and Wall Street. Then we'll zoom in on the physical AI boom, move over to shifting global power dynamics, and finally, we'll wrap things up with the T-Rex and time changes.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the economy and Wall Street.
The absolute magic number driving the U.S. economy right now is 3.5%. Inflation officially cooled down to 3.5% in June, which is a great improvement from May. And the main reason for that relief? We saw a really substantial drop in consumer gas prices right after President Trump reached a temporary ceasefire agreement with Iran. It honestly gave consumers a much-needed breather, and it actually marked the very first month of falling overall prices we've seen in 2 whole years.
Now, when you pair that cooling inflation with a seriously hot IPO market, we just saw that massive SpaceX initial public offering, the result is an absolute windfall for Wall Street. The nation's biggest banks, we're talking JP Chase, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, they just pulled in a staggering $49 billion in collective profit for the second quarter. That is a 39% jump from just a year ago. Trading floors are absolutely bustling, and the American consumer is proving to be remarkably resilient.
But it's definitely not all sunshine and rainbows. Take a look at this quote from JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon. He says, "It's getting close to as good as it gets. We just don't know how long it's going to last." Honestly, he hit the nail right on the head. It brilliantly captures this cautious optimism floating around Wall Street. Executives are nervously watching the tectonic plates underneath all this. Big fiscal deficits, underlying inflation risks, and the fact that renewed fighting in Iran has already sent benchmark oil prices surging 14% this July. The pipeline is full, but the future, well, it's pretty fragile.
Moving right along to Section 2, the physical AI boom.
Think about the contrast here. You've got an old, ivy-covered silo from Marilee and David Killity's former hog farm in Salem Township, Pennsylvania, and then the framing of their brand-new dream home. 2 years ago, developers showed up out of nowhere offering them life-changing money. The Killitys actually thought it was just a bunch of deer baloney, as they called it, but it was very real. And today, their new home is being funded entirely by the AI revolution.
So what does this actually look like for a local economy? It's a total game changer overnight. The Kiliotis were just one of 96 families in Salem Township who collectively sold about 1,700 acres to an arm of Blackstone to build massive data centers. And the numbers here are just wild. They sold for an average of $330,000 an acre. That means these families walked away with $5.5 million on average. We're talking about instantly minting new millionaires in a county where the median income is under 64 grand. It is quite literally a modern-day gold rush. Not for oil or gas, but for the land and the power grids needed to host all those AI servers.
But hey, this physical tech boom isn't stopping at data centers. It is heavily bleeding over into the military sector too. Meet the Archer drone. This was built by a startup called Neros, founded by a couple of 24-year-olds who literally started out racing drones in Indiana cornfields.
And get this, Neros just locked down a Pentagon contract valued up to $500 million to mass-produce cheap killer drones right in Southern California. Why is this such a big deal? Geopolitics. The U.S. military desperately wants to end its reliance on Chinese drone manufacturing. And Neros is building these Archer drones for about $2,000 a piece, meaning they've finally achieved price parity with the Chinese models. They are planning to pump out 1 million drones a year by 2028, turning a scrappy startup into a central pillar of modern U.S. defense.
Which naturally brings us to Section 3, shifting global power dynamics. Let's look at the global chessboard for a second, starting with Russia and China. Years of war and some incredibly heavy economic sanctions have really altered the dynamic between Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. Putin recently went to China hoping to secure the Power of Siberia 2 natural gas pipeline, which is a massive economic lifeline for Moscow. But Chinese officials bluntly rebuffed the deal. They basically said no, not unless Russia offered massive subsidies, essentially demanding the exact same low rates that Russia charges its own domestic citizens. It's a pretty stark picture of an alliance that's become highly imbalanced.
Meanwhile, over in Europe, we are witnessing a huge strategic awakening. Just look at French President Emmanuel Macron riding in his final Bastille Day parade. This wasn't just your standard French celebration. It was a highly choreographed display of European unity.
It featured soldiers from a whole coalition of European nations. It was essentially a very visual, very public declaration of the EU's push for what they call strategic autonomy, their desire to build military independence and stop relying so heavily on the US security umbrella.
And they're not just talking to talk, they are taking concrete steps. Macron just announced a deal to provide Ukraine with advanced French military tech, including Rafale jets. But even bigger than that, a massive new consortium of European companies, think Airbus, Safran, Thales, they're teaming up to build the Blixen XO anti-ballistic missile system. They are actively working to shield their own skies from hypersonic threats without waiting around for outside help.
Back in Washington, lawmakers are looking to flex America's economic muscles in response. There's a proposed bipartisan bill which was championed by the late Senator Lindsey Graham that would actually give President Trump fresh statutory authority to slap secondary tariffs of up to 100% on nations that purchase Russian energy. If this passes, it squarely targets major importers like China and India. It's a really fascinating look at how Congress might start using tariffs not just to settle trade disputes, but as a direct geopolitical weapon.
All right, let's lighten things up a bit for Section 4, T-Rex and time changes.
First up, the House of Representatives just passed the Sunshine Protection Act with a bipartisan vote of 308 to 117. If this clears the Senate, it makes daylight saving time permanent all year round. That means we could finally see an end to that annoying twice-a-year ritual of changing our clocks. Proponents are absolutely thrilled about having later sunsets, but opponents are raising red flags about pitch-black winter mornings. It's one of those rare debates that literally affects every single American's daily routine.
Okay, for our grand finale, I want you to meet Gus. Gus is a 38-foot-long, 67-million-year-old Tyrannosaurus rex. His skeleton was painstakingly excavated over 3 years in South Dakota, and this is him being showcased at a highly anticipated Sotheby's auction. It's an absolutely incredible piece of our planet's ancient history.
But here is the number that is just jaw-dropping, $50.1 million. That is the record-breaking amount an anonymous phone bidder just paid to take Gus home. It completely smashed all previous fossil auction records after the super tense 10-minute bidding war.
Now, since the U.S. allows fossils excavated on private land to be sold to the highest bidder, Gus is officially private property. And honestly, that leaves us with a pretty provocative question to end on today. When a $50 million price tag gets slopped on a 67-million-year-old artifact, should prehistoric history belong in private hands or should it belong in public museums for everyone to see? It's definitely a nuanced debate about where our natural heritage truly belongs. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope this snapshot gave you a deeper understanding of our world in transition.